Welcome to our Take Time Thursdays. I'm happy to have you to join us today. My name is Linda Maxwell. I'm the program manager at the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. I'm so happy to have you to join us for another Take Time Thursdays where we can relax, refresh, and take a break from our busy day. Today, our Take Time Thursdays is about gardening and the new normal, an exploration of the desire to reconnect to green space in these times of uncertainty. And I have a special co-host that's joining me today, my colleague, Katrina Lashley, who is the program coordinator at the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum for the Urban Waterways program. And before I bring on thank you, Katrina, for joining me today. And before we begin, I'm going to just go over the rules of engagement. After the speakers speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to open the call up for questions. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A in the chat, and we will try to answer as many as possible. Thank you, Katrina, for joining us today. Could you tell us about the Urban Waterways program and introduce us to our guests today?
Sure. Hi, Linda. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm very excited to co-host today's discussion. But first, I want to take a couple of moments to kind of place our conversation in the larger context of the work we've been doing at the museum. So as Linda mentioned, I'm the program coordinator for Urban Waterways. The project has just entered its 10th year. And at its heart, Urban Waterways really is an exploration of the relationships between urban communities and their waterways. As people hear the word waterways and they assume that we're focusing only on the river itself, the flora, the fauna, we're operating from the perspective that this really is a project about people. We operate from the perspective that urban waterways, urban rivers, they share the spaces with their communities, but they also share evolving histories, they share the present, and they also share futures to be determined. And so if we're going to talk about this in the lens of relationships, we have to understand that you have to look at it from a variety of perspectives or through different lenses. So yes, the flora and the fauna are very, very important. We're also interested in the lens of history, the lens of culture, the lens of faith, the lens of power, of race, class, economics. Really, the list goes on and on. Everything intersects. Communities and their urban waterways are very much reflections of each other. The health of one is a reflection of the health of the other. And so we found that the work that we've documented here on the Anacostia and in DC for community partners, and our community partners also in Los Angeles, in Pittsburgh, Louisville, Gulfport, Biloxi, Oahu, and also in London, that this work really, I would say, expands. It kind of pushes the definitions of the environment, the definition of environmentalism, the definition of what green looks like, who is green, who is an environmentalist. And it also, I think, challenges to understand that communities understand their connections to the natural world in a variety of ways, that they're willing to engage, they are engaging with their natural resources. And they're also, I would say, willing to advocate for the natural resources, and they're willing to steward the natural resources in a multitude of ways that are not often, I would say, acknowledged, that don't often fall within the lens of traditional green movements or the larger environmental movements, but they're also valid. They're evolving every day, and I would say they add to the ongoing layers of history found within these various communities. So if you want more information, please feel free to check out our new website. Just launched the 15th of this month at anacostia.si.edu/urban waterways. It's just a platform for the various voices within our project, but also for the project's newsletter, and we'll be updating content throughout the summer and in the coming months. And so a major part of this project has been our urban gardening series, which was conceived by my colleague Linda and led by Derek Thomas, and it's now entered its 9th year. And the goal of this program is to have people understand that you can connect to your green spaces in an urban environment, either in your backyard, on your balcony, on your windowsill, on your patio. And I think for many of us, this connection to green space is not too far removed from ourselves. If we think about our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, or even community members or neighbors that we knew who had gardens growing up. Many of us might have memories of being in the garden with our family members and friends, of helping to water, helping to plant, helping to harvest. And I think it really kind of centers us in a place of sense of nostalgia, but also a sense of belonging to a community. And our goal with the Urban and Gardening series has been to help people understand that there's a sense of empowerment that comes with connection to green spaces. Gardens are very much a place of community, however you want to define that. They can be places of advocacy, however that's enacted. They're also very much places of health and well-being in terms of our physical well-being, but also our mental well-being. And those are some of the really key themes that we'll be exploring today with Derek Thomas. It's been our pleasure and our joy to work with Derek over almost a decade now. Derek is a walking encyclopedia, really, of anything having to do with gardening. And so right now I want to welcome Derek to join us in our conversation. Hi, Derek. You're on mute.
There we go.
I'm so glad to talk to you. How are you doing today, Derek?
Good. It looked like it was going to rain, but I think that's past us. So
this is great. So we get a chance to see you in your habitat. So I want to start off really with having folks get a chance to know you as a person. So if you can tell me a little bit about your first connection to the natural world and how gardening has played a role in both your personal and professional lives.
Oftentimes when I'm asked that, one of the earliest memories that I have with the natural world and gardening was in my grandfather's garden. He was, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, West Indies, and he was a chief of police for the area that we lived in. And he gardened. That's what he did to defrag at the end of every day. And I remember having a pineapple that he grew for me, and I cared for this thing at the age of like 4 or 5. And years later, I asked my mom if it was a valid memory, and she was like in tears. She was like, "How do you remember that?" So gardening is in my blood. It's in my spirit. It's something that I've done all my life. When we migrated here, I had every window of our apartment. We lived in the projects in Anacostia, and I had every window of our apartment filled with plants. So I've gardened for all my life.
And what would you say is one of the most important lessons that you've learned in the garden?
Patience. Mother Nature has her own plan, and in spite of everything that we want to have happen, things happen in their own time. And I'm not a patient person, but my garden has taught me a lot of lessons about patience. You can't force a tomato to produce well every year. Some years you have a bumper crop of tomatoes, and some years they just don't do well because the weather's not conducive. So gardening has definitely helped me with patience.
And tell me a little bit about how gardening has played a role in your professional life.
It's my, not only is it my, years ago, I was asked by my parents. They worked really, really hard and worked themselves up the proverbial ladder. And we were fortunate enough that we were putting in a pool. And after the pool was put in, the pool guy came back and he said, "Oh my God, who's your landscape designer? I want to hire them. I need a landscape designer." And my mom said, "Oh, my son did that." And so I very cavalierly at the age of 14 told the pool guy, "Oh, this is my avocation. It's not my vocation." And I kind of went around the barn and finally made it in, and this is now my vocation. So I get to do something that I really love to do every day, which is it's very enviable. And I'm sometimes I have to like pinch myself to make sure that this is really like this what you see behind me here is my garden. So it's kind of crazy.
So Derek, given the first half of this year, thinking about all the challenges that we're all facing, so in terms of the uncertainties of the pandemic, of people losing their jobs, of people being isolated, and also in terms of issues of inequalities that have really come to the forefront, and people's just concerns, their fears, the emotional and physical toll the first 6 months has taken on everyone, why do you think people are really looking to reconnect to these green spaces?
I think that we live on a green planet, and at many of the workshops that we do, I start off our workshops by saying that. And I think what has happened, as we were prepping for this meeting, I was listening to the birds, and I was looking at a female cardinal as she was sitting on my fence, and you know, she went about her business, not minding me, because things have gotten a lot quieter. And I think what people have been challenged to do, and whether it's gardening or you've seen these incredible stories of people that have taken up making masks, or the two sisters who now have their own baked goods store. You know, people have come to the forefront and looked for things that will provide them solace in a very uncertain time. And gardening has always been that, I think. I think gardening has always been something that people have gone to and taken an hour. I had a stone. I don't know. It was an anonymous quote. I don't know who it was from, but it said, "An hour spent in the garden puts life's problems into perspective." And so I think a lot of people are turning back to the green because we have time.
Tell me a little bit about a garden as a place of community.
Well, you know, it was so funny because I was thinking about what's going on right now with the new, if you want to call it, the new civil rights movement that we are entering into. And I was thinking back about Victory Gardens, and I was thinking about how Victory Gardens came to be. And Victory Gardens came to be after World War II, after a very volatile period. And people looked to gardens for solace. So I think we will probably see a community or communities that will start to get around each other and support each other around a garden. And I think that's going to become the norm. We may see an explosion of community garden plots happening again, where abandoned lots are just kind of like hijacked and turned into garden spaces. So I think that we are at the precipice of what has been a movement for quite some time, but I think it's going to change. And I think you're going to see a lot more involvement, and hopefully a lot more involvement from the youth, because they're the ones that we ultimately, in a lot of the programs that we do, we try to reach out to the youth and tell the youth, you know, you've got a opportunity to be great, and you can learn a lot of life's lessons while gardening.
Talk to me a little bit about this idea of health, how gardens are a place of health, not only I would say our physical health, but also our mental health.
Well, mentally, I think that any activity that is a task. So when I go to prune a tomato, or when I go to plant a tomato, or when I go to the garden center to pick out this year's flowers, I step away from my daily crazy, and I get some time to focus on something beautiful. What I think has happened with this whole new norm is that people are realizing what gardeners have realized all along, and that is, you know, you can take the time to smell the roses. You know, that to use a very overused analogy for what we're living through. You know, people are taking the time to smell the roses, and I think that this movement hopefully is going to get its own legs, and it's going to really excel.
Talk to me a little bit about the challenges of food deserts and how gardening, especially community gardens, can help to address some of these issues of food deserts, but also challenges to the health of the communities that are really especially being impacted by COVID-19.
Can you repeat the first part of that question again? I'm sorry.
Tell me a little bit about gardens as being places to address food deserts, a major concern some communities are facing, but also in terms of the communities that are most impacted by COVID-19. How can gardens play a role in the overall physical health of communities, do you think?
Well, you know, it was so funny. We were having a discussion just yesterday about the exact same grocery chain, two different locations, and how one location, the produce aisle is 3 times the size, and it is, you know, stocked with everything from the normal tomatoes and potatoes to the obscure jicamas and star fruit. And it has a lot to do with the neighborhood. And so what I would like to see, and I would like to see people become more advocates of, is that if you live in a community where it's hard to get fresh vegetables, now's the time to reach out to your big box grocery supplier and say, you know what, I've been here. I've been coming to this grocery store through this pandemic. I've been putting on my mask. I've been going through all of this stuff. It's time for you to start giving back to us as a community. Start having more healthy food. You know, I think the Giant Food in Anacostia actually has a really great nutrition program. It should not be something that is fought for. It should be something that is actually a part of the grocery chains give back to the communities. And I think if the grocery stores started becoming much more active in being a part of getting rid of the food desert, we would understand what a food desert is. You know, and many times I still ask people what a food desert is, and they don't know. And it basically means that you live in a neighborhood where you can't, within X amount of radius, get fresh produce. And so, you know, it's time for us to start taking back the helm, because I think we really have captive audiences in retail stores because they have been hurting. And so if we go to our grocery store and we say, you know what, it's unacceptable that we don't have fresh produce, and 3 miles down the road they do.
And so what role can the youth play in this movement, particularly in terms of gardening and demanding access to healthier foods, do you think?
Well, you know, I think first of all, the youth have to understand that, you know, broccoli and cauliflower are good. Growing up, all you could get me to eat was corn. So I think that you have to have a nutritional part where people actually learn that eating good is good. And then you also have to have an understanding through nutrition that, you know, fried foods will cause A, B, and C. Too much sugar will cause diabetes, you know, and different things like that. And I think that if through education about nutrition, we reach out to the youth, I think that they will make the logical connection that looking at things that are growing in your backyard or looking and demanding fresh produce in your grocery are going to make sense and are going to ensure their own health. So I think it has to be an education. It has to be, the horse is actually the education. And then I think the gardening and the green movement will continue to grow.
So before we get to the Q&A, there have been requests to see your garden space. So
Linda asked me to move around. And
so could you please, there have been multiple requests to see your garden space.
Don't mind that big thing behind me. That's my neighbor. And it's about to rain really, really hard. I'm going to turn the camera around so I can walk through and just show you. So everything that you see here, a lot of this stuff, well, these are 2 fig trees that I've had for over 15 years in pots. A lot of the stuff that you see here are stuff that's being actually prepared for clients. We've got cucumbers and pole beans growing on the vines. We've got sunflowers, of course. I plant sunflowers every year. These are heirloom tomatoes here. There's some Thai chili peppers. There's some herbs. It's really starting to rain. I may have to walk us up a little bit. There's more herbs. We've got rosemary, thyme. This is more of just the nursery stuff that we've got growing. This is my palm that's been growing outdoors for over 12 years now. It's a windmill palm. This area here is a little bit of a hillside garden. This is actually a pollinator garden that I have. You've got sages and you've got other things that the hummingbirds really love. My gardenias, they stay outside most of the year. More nursery plant stuff. And then as you walk through the chindo hedge and you get up to the front garden, this is more of my ornamental garden. I've got lilies that are just starting to bloom, topiaries of ivy. That's a monkey puzzle tree that I planted about 12 years ago. I saw someone that had one in Georgetown and I had to have one. A a little contemplative bench where I like to have coffee in the evening. And you can see around a badly placed Japanese maple because it's now almost eaten the entire garden. And then this area here tends to be, in the summertime, it tends to be an homage to my roots. So we've got a lot of tropical plants that would be indicative of what you would see in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm gonna duck into the sunroom. The light may change slightly because it's got growing lights in here for some of the plants. I'm gonna turn myself back around, and it started to rain, so.
Understood. So we'd like to open it up to any questions the audience may have. And as we wait for those to come in, I want to kind of narrow down a bit more because I know that you've had, you've lived many lives in terms of different professions. Could you share with our audience, what was the moment or the time in your life where you made this point, okay, this is really what I'm going to do. The gardening will be the focus of my professional life moving forward. What was the moment, the cause, and how did you actually go from, okay, I recognize I need to do this, now how do I go about doing this?
Desperation. I was at a point where I did not, nothing that I had done had worked out, and nothing that I had done had brought me happiness. And I was 35. So it was 20 years ago, and I stepped out on faith. I said, you know what, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and then I had to figure out how I get there. And so along the way, I studied. I got a degree at USDA grad school in horticulture and landscape design. While I was doing that, I started writing for the Hill Rag. I wrote for the Hill Rag for almost 18 years. I still do online writing for them. Somewhere along the path, I did 8 years as the garden guy for Fox 5 locally here in DC, and all the while building and creating a business. And so, you know, it's been life is what happens while you're making plans. So it definitely was a low time in my life. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I just had to step out on faith that gardens had always been there for me, and that I would be able to make a go at it.
Great. So we have our first question. What do you recommend for those of us like you who live in a place with a cold winter? How can we bring the garden indoors in containers to sustain us all winter? What plants work well inside? Well,
if you can see these lights that are in the ceiling, this is sunroom that I have. And so now, and it's mainly because of the cannabis culture, these lights have become very inexpensive. They're about $30. They are a full spectrum light. And as you can see, when I'm in the room, even my skin tone changes a little bit. These full spectrum lights actually will allow you to have anything that you want grow all year round indoors without the necessity of a window nearby. And so it's really taken indoor horticulture to another level. They're very, very low wattage, and they also have timers built in, so I don't have to remember to turn the lights on every day.
A question from Deborah. I have yellow leaves on my tomatoes. What may be the cause?
Are you there, Katrina?
Yes. Can you hear me, Derek? Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. A question from Deborah. I have yellow leaves on my tomatoes. What may be the cause?
It could be aphids. What you want to do is look at the underside of the yellow leaves, see if you see little tiny, not aphids, spider mites, I'm sorry. See if you see little tiny webs. If you don't, and it's only the lower leaves that are turning yellow, it's just a normal process. If you let a tomato plant dry out between waterings, it will lose its lower leaves rather than lose its fruit. So you want to make sure that you're also giving tomatoes like a lot of water in the middle of summer. So it could be that, but it could be a multitude of things that would cause yellow leaves. Most of the times, if a plant's leaves are turning yellow, it's not enough moisture, and if they're turning black, it's too much moisture.
What herbs can I grow inside my house?
With the full spectrum lights, you can grow anything. There are herb gardens that you can find on Amazon and some of the other, online retailers. I can't remember the exact names right off the top of my head, but there's a lot of gardens that actually will get taller as your herbs get taller. And there's also hydroponic herb gardens now. So if you do a little bit of a search online, there's a number of things that are available.
I have a question, a follow-up on your, as you turn your passion into your career. Were there any mentors who guided you as you built your business over time? And whose or what business model did you follow?
Among other degrees, I have a degree in business that I got right out of high school. So I kind of knew what I needed to do to get a business started. Mentors. I've been really, really lucky in that every time I've had a need, there's been someone to fill that need. So whether it was Joel Lerner when I was at school, or whether it was, just the support of my mother and my father, there have always, all the way along this journey, doors have opened. There have been a lot of challenges. There have been a lot of long 60+ hour weeks rather. But I think if you're passionate about what you're doing, those things are just part of what you have to do.
Jennifer has a question. Do you have any tips for growing cantaloupes?
It depends on the year. Sometimes cantaloupes will overproduce. Sometimes they won't. They need full sun, 6 or more hours of sun. They need a lot of space to run. So you can plant them almost as an undercrop underneath your tomatoes and your other plants. But lots of water, lots of sun, well-drained soil.
So a question, if there's anyone out there who's wanting to start a garden with their children, right, or nieces or nephews or young children, what would be the first steps, do you think, in terms of starting a garden?
There's a lot of tutorials online that you can look at as far as starting your first garden. You want to have 6 hours of uninterrupted sun during June, July, August, because a garden needs 6 hours of direct sunlight. You want to make sure that whatever it is that you're planting, do a little bit of research. With the internet, 20 years ago, you had to go to the library and you had to look it up in encyclopedias or in reference books. Now with the internet, there's almost everything available, just one-stop shopping. So if you want to learn how to grow a better cucumber, it's out there. If you want to diagnose what the problem is that you're having with your tomatoes, it's out there. I think the thing to do is just do it. Thinking about it, you're never going to have the garden. And then also keep in mind, a garden is not kind and you will have failure. But as long as you are prepared for that failure, it's going to be okay. And there's always next year.
I have a really great question that just came in for me from Meryl. 1 second here, let me get to the screen. Okay, which plant in your garden, indoor or otherwise, is the most high maintenance?
Is the most highly...
high maintenance.
Oh, gosh. All of them need maintenance at certain times. I think the highest maintenance plant in my garden would probably be the gardenias that I have, because they are insect magnets. So I always have to watch them. They're in full bloom right now, or getting ready to be in full bloom. And next month they could look awful if I don't stay on top of them. They really do just like a lot of care. But most plants, if you give them the proper nutrition and proper water, which we have a nice rainstorm going on behind us, they will take care of themselves.
Lisa from California wants to know the best time to water tomatoes.
if it's dry, water it anytime. If it's not dry, you want to try to water it in the morning so that it will have moisture going through the day, and then check it again in the evening, because especially if you've got a tomato in a really sunny spot, it may need a second drink in the evening.
And do you bring a lot of your plants in over winter? Where do you plant them and how do you care for them?
I've learned to minimize. The plant room is now full, and so the plants that I have outside, I'll probably have to give away this year. But you know, some of them may get snuck in. And caring for them, bringing a house plant indoors, you have to treat it for insects. You have to get ready because it's going to lose leaves due to acclimation, and it's a little bit of work, but it's worth it.
Okay, any last questions before moving to final thoughts?
Lisa Forbes just said that she will take my extra plants. So hopefully, when we're back in the garden, I will definitely hold you to that.
And follow-up question. Someone mentioned they're really missing our workshops. I want to let everyone know that we will be going virtual for 3 of the workshops. More information coming up very shortly, but we will be back virtually. So just hang in. Stay with us.
And the virtual's not going to be me holding the camera. Janelle has criticized me a couple of times for shaking the camera. It's going to actually be someone doing the camera holding, and I'm going to be digging in the dirt. So it's going to be fun. The virtual workshops are going to be really fun, and we've got some really good ideas that we are fleshing out. And so please stay tuned.
All right. Before we finish up, before I send it back to Linda, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Especially, we have a core group of garden workshop attendees who've been with us for years. Very good to see your questions and to know you're still with us. And once again, Derek, thank you for joining us. And we will definitely be getting the word out about our virtual workshops and more information coming out through the Urban Waterways programming. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Linda, do you want to close us out?
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us for another Take Time Thursday. We look forward to seeing you again next week. So have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Stay safe.
Before we close, I wanted everybody to know about a special program that we're doing on Monday. It's called Art as a Catalyst of Change. Please check our website that Paul Perry posted on the chat so that you can register for that free program. We'll be talking to Minneapolis artist Cadex Herrera, who is one of the artists that produced the George Floyd mural that most people have seen at the site of his killing. So please join us at Monday at 2:30 for a 45-minute discussion if you have time. Thank you so much and have a very great day.
Okay, bye-bye.